Hello everybody, welcome to the vlog. I have spent the last 3 days, as I'm sure many of you guys have, watching the Beatles Get Back miniseries. I've been also spending the last 3 days reviewing the Get Back series. When I say reviewing, I mean I've been doing little analysis slash reaction videos where I sort of go bit by bit through pretty much everything that happened, unpacking everything that is happening in the course of the 8 hours of amazing historic footage. So you can go watch that if you want a longer, more in-depth talk about this. But today I just wanted to do just like sort of a quick overview of my feelings on this miniseries. In short, it's incredible and invaluable. Of course, I'm sure y'all know the backstory. But in January of 1969, the Beatles went into Twickenham Film Studios, rather, in order to get a few songs ready. They want to get a few songs ready so that they can do a couple of live performances, and do sort of a live album, or a live in studio. They're not totally sure how it's going to work out. And you see throughout the course of this documentary that they were really not sure how it was going to work out. And there were many twists and turns along the way. Those 2 concerts wound up being canceled and wound up being rethought of into one spontaneous rooftop concert, the famous January 30th, 1969 rooftop concert. Technically, the last time the Beatles performed in concert in front of an audience, although whether it counts as a concert with an audience is debatable. But yeah, lots of changes. They're originally filming it for a TV series. Then they decided to turn the TV series into a movie. But then what happens after the events of making this documentary is one thing leads to another, and the entire Get Back album project gets scrapped. Then the next year, I think John lets Phil Spector have the tapes, and he remixes the whole album into what we now know as the Let It Be album, which came out in 1970, which Paul, of course, at very least Paul, maybe a couple of Beatles, but at the very least Paul has expressed displeasure about how the Let It Be album turned out, but they also make a movie out of it. The movie does come out in 1970, the Let It Be movie. It was eventually given a release on, I think, Betamax and video cassette, and maybe Laserdisc as well. But that was back in the 80s, and since then it hasn't been reissued again. And part of that is because this was not considered a very good time in their career, and also that movie really did lean into the arguments the band was having around that time. I mean, that was the stuff that was really being portrayed in the media, too. Everyone was talking about how the Beatles are breaking up and how they're having these legendary fights, and that's sort of the angle they went with when they made the Let It Be movie, which, of course, in the years that have gone by has become harder and harder, very deliberately harder and harder to get a hold of, because the surviving Beatles, Paul in particular, sort of just doesn't want that to go down as their legacy, doesn't want this product being sold by them that, displays them in a fairly difficult time in their career when they're really facing an impending breakup and not getting along very well. But yeah, Peter Jackson at some point approached them about getting a hold of those tapes and re-editing them. And of course they're hesitant. I always thought we would never see a reissue of the Let It Be movie until after Paul and Ringo were gone. I knew they would never sign off on it. Little did I know that we would get all of that and so much more. But yeah, so Peter Jackson spent a long time convincing Paul McCartney that he would absolutely not be trying to make a story of how the Beatles broke up, but rather a story of the art that they created, and really of 4 guys having fun in studio. And Paul said, yeah, I still don't think you're going to review this footage and find that, but he said, just let me do this, you'll have final cut. I think all 4 of the 2 living Beatles and the 2 estates, I think, had to sign off on it in the end, but he did a great job of convincing Paul and Ringo that he could do it, and when they saw the final cut, they really liked it, they approved it, and now here it is. It was marred in development for a while, though. It was supposed to come out a while earlier, but it got delayed due to some COVID-related issues, as just about everything has lately. But now we finally have it, and it's amazing. You get to see certain songs. I think the highlight of this documentary for me, the highlight was seeing the entire process of the Beatles creating the song Get Back. There's a scene where Paul is stressed for time at Twickenham, and he just starts strumming out chords on his bass. It does seem like he's playing little bass chords, which is interesting. Anyway, he's strumming stuff out on his bass, and just the little tune he's strumming to try to come up with anything resembling a song turns out to be the exact moment of creation of the song that would become Get Back. So we get to see the moment of conception for that song, pretty much straight through recording, and yeah, the recording, the take that would wind up eventually as the single and on the Let It Be album, and then also the rooftop performance of it as well. So we get the whole story of how that song was created. It is absolutely amazing. Part 1 focuses on the week that they spent at Twickenham Studios, which seems to start well. The first couple days seem productive. They're working through some songs, and it doesn't end quite so productively, though. And I was worried going into this. Not worried, but I was like, well, it'll be cool to see this footage, but obviously it'll be heavily edited, because I thought that in order to remove the sort of fighting and arguing amongst the band, that a lot would have to be cut out, and we'd see sort of a sanitized version of the event. This is not so. There are a lot of disagreements, a lot of very uncomfortable moments. But throughout, the film does a good job of demonstrating the love that the four have for each other, even throughout the difficult moments. It was really, really well put together. And a lot of that unhappiness does happen within that first part. The first part, you see George getting increasingly frustrated, particularly at his feelings that Paul is kind of trying to micromanage everything. Instead of allowing George to come up with his own sort of guitar parts and unique takes on what he's going to bring to each song, he basically stops him every time and says, no, I think you should play this. I think you should play it more like this. And then this leads to George getting angry, and then George starts criticizing like harmony arrangements, and they have a few fights, which again, in my analysis series, I go through in a little bit more depth. But yeah, that week ends with George making the surprise announcement that he's leaving the Beatles effective immediately, and he's gone, and he's tired of it. And then John, at some point during that, says, well, if he's not back by Tuesday, we'll get Clapton in. So, in theory, there's some alternate universe where Eric Clapton joined in to help them finish that album. And while it would not have been the same, it might have been good. Yeah, but it wouldn't have been the same, obviously. The Beatles are the Beatles are the Beatles. You can't really imagine them with any different lineup, except, I mean, the addition of Billy Preston does not hurt. The end of episode 1 mentions that they then met with him at his house the next day, and it didn't go well. So it does leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger. I really didn't think that we'd get cliffhangers in this series, but we sort of did. And then I got this feeling that was very interesting, because each of these episodes is 2.5 hours long, approximately. And after the first one, watching the Beatles in studio for a week, it really feels like you're right there with them when, like, I'm going to wake up tomorrow just like they did and get back into this project. Because the next day they release part 2, days 8 to 16, which starts with a lot of uncertainty, them just being unaware whether anybody's going to even show up to continue this project at all. Ringo shows up, Paul shows up, and there's a really depressing moment there. A really amazing to watch moment. Probably it might be the coolest single moment in the documentary. Not coolest, but most interesting. When they're not sure if John is going to show up and they know George isn't going to show up. There's a moment where Paul says, well, I guess, and then there were 2. And then there's a long lingering silence where Paul and Ringo get like visibly emotional. It's honestly hard to watch because you can see them at that point really coming to terms with the point that the Beatles might be broken up. It might be done. It was not done, at least not yet, but that's a wild moment. And eventually after lunch, They get John to show up, and apparently John had been talking with George previously, and says that George is taking a break in Liverpool, but he will be back in town later that week. They eventually meet with him and get the old band back together, but George isn't happy with the way things were going. He never really seemed comfortable with the film cameras. But yeah, so George agrees to come back on a couple of conditions. They want to move back to Abbey Road, not the same studio space they'd used before, a makeshift studio they built in the basement of Abbey Road, and that they're going to cancel this TV series. Because that's something I didn't even really get into yet, is it really adds a new dynamic with the Beatles knowing they're being filmed for a TV series, and it's sort of uncomfortable a little bit. And there's a couple of times where Paul says certain things, a few of them, mostly Paul, say certain things like, "Oh man, what I want to say to you, I can't because there's cameras," which, I don't know, maybe that's a good thing, who knows. But yeah, that second week they work in the studio. Eventually they do allow cameras back in, but instead of making a TV series, now they've decided by that point they're going to edit it into a movie. Sessions still aren't going that great, although they're clearly happy that George is back. And they also have these piano parts they want to play. But again, the whole concept of this is to do stuff that's replicatable live and to do certain performances that are indeed live. In fact, they want all of them to be complete takes live in studio at the very least, if not like live in front of an audience. So they're worried that if one of them has to play the piano parts, then they're only going to have like one guitar and it's going to sound thin. So they're like, we need someone else from the outside. And George had mentioned in passing, I think it was George, in the first episode, how much he loved Ray Charles's band, specifically organist Billy Preston. They'd known Billy Preston since their days in Hamburg, and turns out by lucky coincidence he happens to be in town to film a couple of like just TV appearances, and so they have him in sort of. They just invite him over. Hey, we're making an album. Just come in and visit. And he has no idea that they're effectively about to ask him to join the Beatles. They say, yeah, we just need someone to play these keyboard parts for us for the next couple weeks while we make this album. Oh, and appear with us in a live performance as well. And he's so giddy. He's so excited. I mean, wouldn't you be if the Beatles said, hey, we need a keyboard player. You want to play keyboard, in the Beatles? And so he's very excited, and his excitement seems to rub off on the rest of the band. And it just really feels like from the second Billy Preston enters the space, a lot of their problems are solved. I think there's a mix of a couple of things going on. First of all, just an infusion of really a great new sound. Billy Preston has it together. He, from the second he plays these songs, seems to know intuitively what to play that sounds awesome, and he makes the song sound great. But also, just like having someone so happy and so eager to be in the project, it's like they don't want to let him down now. So it creates a really fun dynamic where they then have a really productive week. But the logistic of their show isn't going through. Like, it was originally supposed to be the weekend of the 19th and 20th of January, but they push it back a week after George left and came back in. And then the ability to play a live show. They even talk about making a live show in Libya. They talk about going to Libya for a live show, but that never pans out. Then they talk about going to a park in London, but that never pans out. And Paul, at one point, gets very upset that the whole point of doing all this thing, the live show, is not going to happen. But it seems like it was... I have to go back to my notes. I think it was the TV director who had the idea. Why don't we just go up on the roof? And he tells Paul about it, and he's really, really excited about it. They eventually do a rooftop concert. Sorry, I'm going so in-depth into the details that I don't need to, because like I said, I literally already made a 3-part series where I go into the details of this documentary, but I just can't shut up about it. It's literally, the best way I can describe it is you just get to sit there for roughly 7.5 hours and just be a fly on the wall during one of the most productive but tumultuous months in Beatles history. An extremely important month of work in the scope of rock and roll history in general. And this series does culminate in virtually the entire rooftop performance. It's a miraculous piece of work. I am so stoked on the fact that it exists at all and that it was made. And I can honestly tell you, I will never be able to listen to Let It Be the same way again. After watching this series, I'll never watch it the same way again. Oh, I should mention one more thing I was going to say. It's that, of course, Yoko was in the studio with John full-time by this point. But an interesting thing that I noticed is that she is almost never featured. If she was doing a lot of, like, talking in the studio, it's not seen. And I'm really not sure if she was mostly edited out of it, or if she just mostly sat and was quiet for most of it. There are certain jams they play which feature her, but you almost never hear her say anything. In the last part, there's a clip of her telling George that it would be cool. George, there's an incredible intimate conversation at one point where George, one of the coolest parts of the documentary, where George is telling John that he wants to go off and make a solo album. He has so many songs and they're not getting featured by the Beatles. He just wants to make a solo album. And at that point, Yoko is heard to say, you should, like she's being encouraging there, and that's one of the only times you hear her speak. But yes, anyway, I could go on about this forever, but in the end, we get this amazing record of this month, featuring the Beatles, Yoko Ono, Linda McCartney shows up a few times throughout this. I guess she's Linda Eastman at this point. She makes a few in-studio appearances, and it's really nice to see her. I know we see Maureen Starkey, Richard's wife, yes, Richard's wife, Ringo's wife, in there as well. And at a certain point, for one day of recording, one day late in the sessions that winds up being a really productive day where they use 2 or 3 songs for the Let It Be album, Linda brings her daughter into the studio, which brings an interesting vibe. There's even a scene where the whole band, like plus Yoko, plus Linda's daughter get into a jam. It's wild. But yeah, we also get to see a lot of George Martin doing what he's most known for doing, being the Beatles producer. But they also have Glyn Johns with them. They have legendary producer Glyn Johns in to do some engineering and to just generally set up the systems. There's a lot of like technical difficulties to deal with and unpack in this film as well, with just like because they're setting up makeshift recording devices in a film studio first. Then by the time they get to Abbey Road, their usual studio facility is booked up, so they build them their own studio to just have in the basement. And yeah, so there's a lot of logistical stuff that Glyn Johns is helping them with. But yeah, you get, of course, Billy Preston. You get lots of shots of Mal Evans, the Beatles' famous longtime roadie, including just the most awesome sort of clips of Mal trying to fend off the policemen at the rooftop concert, where Mal is effectively just... At first, he's just trying to delay them, because he knows they're going to have to stop the concert eventually. He's just trying to delay them any way they can. At first, there's a scene where he's, trying to convince them to just let them do a couple songs. They say no. Then he tries to just keep them arguing for as long as possible. He just wants to keep the argument going, because as long as they're standing in the lobby arguing, they can't be up to the roof shutting everything down. Then, after he's exhausted that option, he tells him, you know what, yeah, you're right, I'm going to go up there, and I'm going to turn off the PA systems, so that they can just record into the board, and it'll be fine, but it'll be quiet. And they're like, thank you. Good, because they've got so many noise complaints, they have to shut it down. But I don't think he ever shut the PA system off at all. I think that just bought him some time to, like, run up to the roof, or at least run somewhere, wait there for a song. He eventually comes back down to the lobby, tells the policeman, cool, I've shut that off, I've shut off a couple things up there, I've just got one thing more to do, I gotta run down to the control room and fix that, which buys them more time to go over there. But eventually the police do come up and stop the concert. So that's, that's my favorite Mal Evans moment of the documentary. You get a lot from Michael, the director of the film series turned TV show, the TV series turned movie turned this now in 2021. But yeah, I don't know what else to say. You get to hear the making of so many songs, not only that wound up on Let It Be, but some also that wind up either being released as a single during 1969 or on what would become their Abbey Road album. I can't unpack it all here. That's why I've made that 3-part series, but watch it right now. It's amazing. I mean, I have some worries that if you're not a big Beatle fan, you might not be into it. I can get that, because it is, while there is like a storyline to what's going on, Peter Jackson and the crew seem to have made a pretty deliberate effort not to sort of inject any narrative into it, more to just present the footage so you can be a day-by-day fly on the wall. But what they have done a lot of, and they've done a very good job of, is putting up title cards, reference footage, reference clips, and just other things that help you know where you are sort of in context. So, yeah, it's very well put together, and I know I just said that maybe if you're not a huge Beatles fan, you won't like it, because it is literally just you sitting down for 8 hours and watching them recording an album. But, I mean, if you are a music fan, I mean, you should be interested in the amazing process that led to the creation of this album. So, I highly recommend it. I'll probably come back and watch it again sometime soon, because I feel like with all that happened, there's going to be some more stuff to find in there. You know, I can't imagine I got every detail from just one viewing. Anyway, thank you for watching this ramble. I apologize that it wasn't a more better thought through, put together review, but I just finished watching part 3 and getting my analysis video up, and I just wanted to do this video where I talk about the big picture. Yep, go watch it right now. Big thanks to everyone who was a part of making this feature. It may be obvious, but I should mention that I am not paid in any way to endorse this or nothing. Yeah, go watch it. Thank you for watching. For those of you who don't know, I am a musician myself. You can check out the description for links to where you can find my music where it's sold or streamed online. Like this video if you like what you saw. Subscribe to my channel if you've been enjoying my videos. And you can ring the notification bell too if you'd like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, which should be really soon. The next video I plan on making is a review for I really want to watch the new Brian Wilson documentary. Can't wait to watch that. So that'll be next. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys again real soon.